G'day. In this video, we're going to be looking at buttons and we're going to be picking some colors. Let's get into it. So let's just start straight away. We'll start with a blank file this time. So we'll import Tkinter as TK, and we're not going to do anything with TTK widgets this time, but we are going to do something new. We're going to go from Tkinter, import, and we're going to use this thing, the color chooser. So we're going to find out how to use that. Let's create a class, but this time we're not going to create an application window class, or we're not going to use that as our base class. We're going to use a frame as our base class. So we'll just do that. Put tk.frame in between the brackets, and we'll make that class in a second. Let's just add the bottom of our file. So we'll go if underscore name double underscore double equals quote double underscore main double underscore quote colon. That's our idiom to run the code for us when we run the script. So we'll do root equals, and this time we'll have to create an application window. So we'll do that. We'll set its size for our application, same as we've done before. So let's just make it 300 by 300. Oops. There we go, finally. And what we'll do is we'll create a frame in our application window. And this one will be our actual Snappy TK class. And we're going to have to send it the parent. And the parent's going to be the application window. We'll fill that in a minute. And we better pack our frame so that it displays. And we may as well make it fill up the whole window. And expand as well. That way the frame will fill up the 300 by 300 pixels. There we go, and we'll run our main loop. Okay, now we haven't done anything with our class yet, so nothing's going to happen. So let's just start making our class. Now in this class, we're going to have a few extra functions. When you start making more complicated Tkinter software, it's a good idea to lay out your code in a sort of a structured manner. So we're going to start doing that today. So we need the init function when we start our frame, or when we start to create our frame down here. That's when this line of code runs. The init function is the one that's actually going to be running. So we're going to give that a master parameter, and we're going to set that as something we remember. And then we're just going to call our parent class, which is the tk.frame one. So we need .init there, and we're just going to put self.master in between there. So all that's done is that basically says when we create our frame, it's going to belong to the root window. So that frame's going to belong to the window, and when it calls the master, it's going to know that it belongs to the root window as well, when it calls the parent class, I should say. Okay, we'll leave that for the moment. Let's create our next function. We'll just put some names in for the moment. And we'll make this one configure UI. We won't put any code in a minute. Well, we won't put it in yet. We'll put it in shortly. Then we'll create one called create interface. And that's where we're going to lay out our widgets. And then we'll create one final one, which is going to be how we tell our code to select a color. So we'll call it select color. And again, they've all just got self in between the brackets because they all belong to the class. Okay, so that's our 4 functions that we're going to create. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this function configure UI to set up our frame and any kind of options for the frame. And then this one to lay out the widgets that go inside the frame and to create the interface. And then finally that one, well, we'll talk about that one in a minute. So let's go up. All we need to do is make sure that when we initialize our frame, when we first call it back down here, that we run some of these functions. So we're going to run the configure UI function. So we'll just do that. That will run that function, and then we're going to run the create interface function. Create interface. Okay. All right, so what do we need? Let's start building our UI. Well, we're not going to need much for the UI because we've only got a frame. So let's set a default background color for the frame. So let's change our frame's background color. So we'll do self.config. And we'll do the BG option equals, and then we'll just put it to white. So we'll do a hash symbol and then 6Fs. That'll set it to white. And we're going to use the grid manager for the frame. So we better tell the frame the sizes of the grid. So we'll set the first column, because it's only really going to have one column, we'll make it stretch out. So we'll set it to weight equals 1. And we'll do the same for the rows as well. That's just going to lay out the grid the way we want it to be. Okay, and that's all we need in configure UI. So let's create some interface now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to use a TK variable. And that is a handy little object to store information that you can use with the widgets. So let's have a look at that. We'll look at it in more depth in another video, but for today, let's use one. So we're going to call it color, and TK it's going to be a string variable. And we're going to set its value to white again. So same as before, hash 6Fs. There we go. And we've created a variable. And it's going to have this string stored inside it. So now we can create some widgets and we can use this variable. So let's create a label that's going to display whatever is being stored in this variable. So we'll call it self.colorLabel. And this is going to update as we change the colors. It's going to show us what the color actually is in terms of its value as a string. So we need to add this to the frame. So we put self in there. And we're going to use the text variable attribute or argument. And we're going to set it to self.color, the variable that we just created. And I think initially we might use it again to set the background color. So we'll set the background color of the label to white as well. So we'll do BG equals self.color. Now this is where you have to remember that Tkinter variables are a bit different from a normal Python variable. They have a get and a set method, and you have to use them. So we're going to use get here. And that's going to give us back the value that's stored in the variable. Normally in Python, you wouldn't need the get thing, but in Tkinter, when you use a TK variable, you're going to need the get function or the get method. Okay, that's our label done. So we better add it to the grid. So the frames grid. So self.colorLabel.grid row equals 0, column equals 0. And we're going to make it sticky, and we're going to just stick it down the bottom of that cell. So we'll do tk.S for south. So that'll put it in the middle down the bottom. Okay, so we've done that. Now all we need is one more widget, I think. We'll go with one more. Let's create a button that we can click on. So this time we're going to go self.colorButton. And this was going to be a tk.button. Again, it's going to belong to the frame, so we put self there. And this time, we'll just put some text in, and this is what's going to display on the button. So it's going to say select a color. Oops, there we go. Now buttons take a special argument called command. And this is where you tell the button what to do when you click it. And this is where we're going to use our select color function, because when you put in a command, it's basically the name of a function, and then when you click the button, that function is going to be run. So when we click this button, we want it to run our select color function. So we just put in there self.selectColor, the name of the function. And you'll notice that we don't need any extra parentheses. We don't need parentheses on the end of it. It's just select.color, self-select.color, the name of the function. And that's going to run when we click the button. Done. Okay. So now that we've done that, let's add our button to the grid. Self.colorButton.grid. And this time we'll put it under the label. So we'll do row equals 1, column equals 0, and we won't even bother setting sticky or anything like that. Okay, and let's just put something in there, pass. That just means the function's going to be ignored, but it's still going to work. And let's test out and see if our layout works. Let's see what it looks like. Let's have a go. So we'll run it. And there's our window. We've got our window, which is set by here, the size of the window, 300 by 300. It's got a white background. There's our label, and it's got the information in it. We didn't set any text for our label. There's no text in here, but it's using what's stored in the string variable, the TK string variable. So it's showing us the white color in hexadecimal. And we've got our button down the bottom. And when we click our button, it doesn't do anything. Nothing happens at the moment because that's we haven't fixed or haven't finished this select color function. So that's what we've got left to do. Let's so what's going to happen is when we click the button, we're going to pick a color, and then we're just going to change the frame color so it changes to the color we pick, and we'll also change the label's text so it shows us the new color. Okay, so let's go. Let's do that. Won't take long. Let's get this done. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the value that's stored in here by picking a new color. So self color is going to swap to whatever color we pick, the value for it. So let's do that first. So we do self.color, and we're going to set it. Now, what are we going to set it to? Well, we're not going to set it to like a string. We're not just going to tell it what the color is. We're going to pick the color. And to do that, we're going to use this thing we imported up the top, the color chooser. This is a built-in part of TK when you install it. So it's kind of handy if you want to pick colors. So we just go color chooser, and we go ask color. And in between the brackets, we can add a few options. We can add something like a title, which you'll see what it does in a minute. Pick color. Pick a color. There we go. Let's just see what that does. We've only added that one line with the color chooser. Let's run our code again, see what it does. Select the color, and look at that. We get a nice color choosing window appearing. And you'll notice there's our title, pick a color. And we can click on colors. And watch what happens. It did update our text. Now you'll notice that we've got a few different values. We've got the red, green, blue numbers, and we've got the hexadecimal values at the end. We only want those hexadecimal ones. So color chooser, ask color, if you look on the help information, it returns all this information. So there's the colors that we got back in numbers, red, green, blue, and there's our string at the end. And you'll notice it's a tuple. It returns a tuple. So if we get the last part of our tuple, we can just get the string. So in other words, if we get the last part of the tuple by using square brackets -1, that should just give us back the hexadecimal. Let's see if it does. We'll pick a color again. Say we go this one, click OK. Now we just get the hexadecimal information. Sweet. And we've set that into our color variable. All right, all we got to do now is change the frame and the label. Let's do that then. That won't take long. So let's do self.config because we're configuring our frame. That's the class. So self.config configures the frame class, and we'll change its background color. So background equals, and what color do we want? We want the color stored in the variable. So it's stored in self.color, so we just have to get it. So we do self.color.get. That's going to give us back whatever is being stored in there, which we just set before when using the color picker, the color chooser. All right, while we're at it, why don't we try setting the labels color as well? Same as the forms color or the frames color. So let's do the color label, and we're going to do config again, or configure. It's the same thing. And we'll do background equals, well, it's actually the same stuff. We could copy and paste this whole thing if we wanted to. So we'll do that. There you go, like that. It's the same thing we're setting, just for the different object. This time we're setting the color label. All right, let's see if it works. So we currently got white, and our label's got white, and we'll select a color, and let's move it across. So we'll go for this red, and it should change the color of the whole frame and even the label's background color. Let's see. And we'll click OK, and there we go. We've now got a red frame, and it changed the text of the label, and also the label's background color is red too. We can tell that's changing the label. Let's just comment out that code and you'll see the difference. So when we click and run it now, ooh, where'd it go? Come on, there we go. I think I have to try again. Click and run it now. There we go. So we've commented out that last line here, so it's not going to run. So let's just see what it does this time. We'll go with blue, and this time you'll see the label's background hasn't changed. So that's what this line does here. And that is how you can use a button to run a function using the command option for the button. You can use the color chooser to get that window up and pick colors easily. You can use config, and you can change the settings on your objects like a label or a button or the frame. And we've laid out our code in a very uniform and easy to understand manner. We've got our interface code, we've got a function, we've got our UI configuring here, and it all looks good. And that's all we're going to do for today. Thanks for watching. Hope you found that useful. See you in the next video.